So when we look at building workouts, when we look at what our dynamic warm-up is going to be like, we start off with some foam rolling, then we do some stretching, and then we'll go core activation and or corrective, and then into some movement pattern development, and then get a little fast and twitchy and then work out, right? So whoever asked me the question earlier about like, what's your warm-up? And I said, 6 to 12 minutes, 6 phase dynamic warm-up, whatever. I'm kind of showing you one phase at a time. So what were the foam rolling muscles that you guys learned Friday, last week? What areas of the body? Calves,
Quads.
hamstrings, quads, glutes, okay? Did you say lats? Triceps. Okay, cool. So the way that I think about it is I would call myself a non-painful mover. Like I do not currently have pain. I move pretty well. So what that means is I'm gonna pick one muscle to foam roll and one muscle to stretch, and they're gonna be the same. So whatever I foam roll, I stretch, right? They sort of work together like peanut butter and jelly. Like you knead the dough and then you roll it out, right? So the muscles that we taught you how to foam roll last time, we're kind of pairing stretches to them. For some clients, if they are in pain, if they don't move very well, we might need to do 2 foam roll, 2 stretch, right? But like, as far as efficacy goes, like I wanna do something that's meaningful. I'm not gonna like foam roll quads and then stretch lats. It's not wrong, it's just not the most effective, right? So if I'm doing a lower body day, then I would pick quads. If I'm doing an upper body day, I would pick lats. If I'm doing a total body day, I don't know, maybe I would do both. But whatever we foam roll, we stretch, okay? So then the other thing around stretching is when we do the flexibility component, we're gonna learn all about individual isolated static stretching, and there's a place and a purpose for it. Stretching has phases, just like anything else. Like when I learn how to squat, am I gonna start off by doing a barbell back squat on day 1? No, probably gonna do a body weight squat on day 1, right? So same thing with stretching. When I start stretching for the first time ever, am I gonna do a total body integrated dynamic stretch? Probably not. I'm probably gonna lie on my back with my leg up in the air and hold onto it with a rope. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm already showing you something a little bit more advanced than what that basic level is, because it suits you guys. It would be the right stretching formula for where you're at in your workouts. So we're gonna do 3 lower body, maybe 4, and 2 or 3 for the upper body that sort of pair around the areas that we learned how to foam roll, okay? So first one that we're gonna look at is a split kneeling quad / hip flexor stretch. Really good one, especially because people sit so much, especially because we see people with a lot of sort of that Instagram posture, right? Their butt pops out the back and their stomach hangs out the front, right? Which means their pelvis isn't in a super good position. And because when we do things like squats and hinges and lunges, right, we need the hip complex to be stable, but also move effectively. So our 3 lower body stretches are gonna be based around hip mobility, okay? So here's what it's gonna look like. What I want you to do is start with, we call this the split kneeling position or half kneeling, okay? So I want my toes tucked under, and I want my hips to be about, or my feet rather, my knee and my foot to be about hip width apart. In line is just really hard to hold my balance, right? So I give myself a little bit of a bonus. So it's sort of like 90 degrees here, 90 degrees there. And what I want to do in dynamic stretching is stretch a position that I would load, right? So would I load this position and do dumbbell pressing? Sure. Would I load this position and do dumbbell pressing? I hope not. Right? So when we talk about stretching, we want to think about like, I'm about to go work out. What position do I want to be in when I exercise? Okay? So we tuck the back toe. We're going to take the pelvis and tuck it under. So it's that belt buckle to chin. And what that should do is start to create a little bit of the stretch feeling in the hip flexor and in the front of the quad. You feel that? Okay. Similar to foam rolling when we were talking about intensity, I kind of want like a 4, maybe a 5 out of 10. Okay? So if you're in that sort of 4 or 5 right now, then you can stay there. If you're not, maybe move this foot forward a little bit and come forward just a little bit, but keep your glutes engaged. Keep your back foot pushing down into the floor. Make this active. So if you had to, you could stand up into a lunge, right? That's the sense of it being active, okay? So then from there, hands on the knees, shoulders down. Hey, Nate, just grab a mat from upstairs and come join us. Okay, so hands on my knee, that allows me to keep my chest upright, my core engaged, and I'm actually gonna use my hands to push my knee forward a little bit. So here's the oscillation, right? We learned this when we foam rolled. We're gonna oscillate in our stretch as well. And I'm trying to keep this connected. So I'm not like letting it go and falling out, right? I wanna stay in that connected zone. So about 30 seconds of oscillation. And then we're gonna pause in that new end range and hold. So my glutes are engaged, my pelvis is tucked under, I get a nice stretch across the front line, my shoulders and hips are parallel, my core is still engaged, right? Lots of work is happening in this position. And then I release and come out, right? So 15 seconds to oscillate, about 15 to 30 seconds in the end range hold. That's gonna prepare me to work out versus improve my flexibility, help restore length tension relationships, like all the other benefits that we get out of stretching, they're still valid. I'm just trying to stretch in a way that prepares me to exercise, right? All right, so tuck your back toe under. Think about knee, hip width apart, knee and foot about hip width apart. Maybe walk this foot forward a little bit more if you need to. Now tuck your tailbone. Feel that your abs are braced, feel that your glutes engaged. Move into a stretch that feels like 4, maybe 5 out of 10. Keep your ribs and your shoulders stacked above your hips, okay? And then we're gonna do that little oscillation. So pushing forward, keeping your chest up, keeping your shoulders back, breathe, right? Breathe while you're stretching. It's not like inhale, exhale specifically, but breathe through the time that you're stretching. Okay, and then come forward into that new end range and hold. Keep the tension in the glutes. Feel that little bit of increased intensity in the stretch. Be in a really nice strong position you would lift from, or you would bear load in. And then relax. Okay, so feel how that opens up the front. We're kind of sneaking in a little bit of glute activation at the same time. So I'm gonna give you a second, practice that one with your neighbors. So partner A, teach this one to partner B. And then just do one, and then we'll switch to the next exercise. But see if you can go through the cues. Tuck the toe, tuck the pelvis, right? Create some tension, oscillate, and range hold. Okay? Go. All right, so sorry about that camera angle. This one will just sort of show you position a little bit better. So what's really important is what we call sort of that pillar of stability. So you'll notice in that initial setup, back toe is tucked under, the knees under the hip is in line with the ribs and the shoulders and the head, right? So we want to really take out any of the arching in that low back. And then once we've got that little bit of stretch in the front of the hip, we start doing the oscillations. In this version, in the end range hold, I'm showing just a little bit more extension by adding the arm reach overhead. So that's an option for people that are able to hold position. Okay, so what muscle would that one pair with? We foam rolled what? We would put it with this stretch.
So foam roll with this stretch, right?
Quad. Yeah, so we would have foam rolled quad, and then we would pair it with that stretch, right? Okay, second one we're gonna look at, we're sort of looking at the hip in the 3 directions it moves. So second one we're gonna look at is called an adductor rock back. Did you guys learn how to foam roll the inner thigh? Yeah. Okay, so foam roll the inner thigh, we would pair it with this adductor rock back, okay? So what we wanna do for this one is take our quadruped stance, extend one leg out to the side. Again, when I say things like positional mastery, what I'm typically talking about is shoulders, spine, and hips, the position of my torso. I always want that to be in a safe, strong, sound position because that's feeding information to my brain about whether or not my body's in a good position, right? So similarly, where this is not a particularly safe position, I'm hanging off of connective tissues and I'm in a space where I don't have good stability. Same thing in this position. What we have to think about is here, right? So like, I don't want to be in my quadruped position like this. That would be a similarly unstable position. So we want to be in that nice neutral position, extend one leg out to the side. My hips, my spine, and my shoulders are still in nice sort of square alignment. And I like this position because it allows me to be active. So I'm pulling my toes up towards my hip. This leg has more action in it, right? Versus being like in a floppy position, okay? So from there, what you do to find the 4, 5 out of 10 is if you think about your pelvis like a steering wheel, I have my right leg out to the side. What I'm gonna do is turn the right side of my pelvis down towards the floor, right? So if I'm tight, I sort of am up here like this. If I turn that hip down towards the floor, that's what creates the stretch in the inner thigh. So now I have my 4, my 5 out of 10. Now I'm just gonna rock back by about 1 inch and then come forward again. So I have to create the stretch before I rock back, because what I'm trying to avoid is I don't really feel a stretch. Okay, now I feel a stretch, but like now my tailbone's curved under. Like, would I lift in this position? No. So from here, as I rotate the right side of the hip down towards the floor, I have stretch. Now when I rock back, I'm in a nice stable position that I would actually put load on, right? So try that with your foot dorsiflexed, which means your toe pulled up towards the hip. Turn the right side of the hip down to find the stretch, and then rock forward and back 1, maybe 2 inches. You're trying to keep your tailbone pointing straight back to the wall behind you. You want to avoid the tailbone curling down towards the floor, right? So again, we would oscillate for about 30 seconds, and then we would hold in that new end range for about another 15 to 30, right? The most important thing we're doing through all of this while maintaining our form is breathing. So if I'm going from a 4, a 5, 6, like that little bit of resistance that we're feeling, part of what's gonna help that like become a little bit more normalized is breathing, right? Okay, so let's try the other side. Just set it up and show me what it looks like. What I want you to sort of be able to play around with a little bit is once you're in the position and you look like you're doing it right, what do you have to do to actually find the stretch, right? Like our hips move in a lot of different directions. So we've got to get comfortable with the sense of extending the tailbone back, lengthening through the torso, so we've got lots of length, and then sort of playing around with that little lateral rotation to find the stretch, yeah? So start off in just your hands and knees. Okay, so we saw how his spine was a little bit rounded. In general, he looks like he's a little bit stiff, right? So one thing around setup is if the hands and the knees are too close together, it's automatically gonna round his spine out a little bit. So back your knees up a little bit. Good, nice, pause there. And then think about lengthening your chest forward, but not your head. So keep your head down. Good, so we wanna try to at least start from this position. And then if you draw the abdominals up a little bit, good, but lower this. There. Yes, that. Okay, what does that feel like to you? Like, what did you do to get to here?
More of a rotation for pelvis.
Okay, so more of a tilt with the pelvis. And actually what it's doing is he's got better activation in his core now, right? Okay, so from this position, I want everything here to stay in the same place, but go ahead and extend your leg out to the side. Good. So when we set this up, it's easier to keep it. When we don't have it, it's harder to try to recreate it later, right? So now we're in a better position. Do you feel a stretch in the inner thigh? Yeah. Good, so I don't even have to get him to move, he already feels a stretch. So maintaining this nice shoulders, spine, and hip sort of pillar position. Now all I want you to do is slide back like 1/2 inch pause, and then come forward again. Good, so you're just working inside of that small little range, keep going. And as you go back just a tiny bit, I want you to think about turning your tailbone up towards the ceiling. Yes, good. Stay inside of that nice small range. And you're sort of just working inside of 1 inch where the intensity feels like maybe a 4 or 5 out of 10. Good. Good. In this case, movement feeds movement. So if we're about to go move and work out, we want to incorporate movement into our warm-up, right? What's up, Eric?
That's good.
Big man in the house. Good, okay, now find that end range and hold. So pause right there, think about turning the tailbone up towards the ceiling just a little bit.
In that back portion, you turn the tailbone up?
Yeah, like I literally just want your pelvis to do a little bit of an anterior tilt. So you're tucking your tail under, I want you to just a little bit tilt it upright.
Okay.
Yeah, you feel more of a stretch when you do that?
Yeah, and should it be upright the whole thing?
We're trying to stay in neutral. But when your client shows you a posterior pelvic tilt, you're going to get them back to neutral by cueing an anterior pelvic tilt, right? Yeah. Good. There you go. Okay, nice. Coach your partner on other side. So this one's a 90-90 stretch. So what that means is sitting down, let's sit on our left hip with the knee at 90 degrees in front of the mat, and then the other leg makes 90 degrees. I don't know how to say that. Unfortunately, is half of a swastika. That's what the shape is. Okay? Now, what you'll see when people are inflexible is they'll end up with sort of a C-shaped curve in the spine. So what we want to try to do is use this hand to push ourselves up and get really nice and upright in the spine to the best of our ability. Okay? These are active stretches, right? So it doesn't really do me any good to be like, okay, I'm stretching, right? So like we're trying to be active. So lifting up is a way to do that. If you lift yourself up and kind of pull the leg underneath you a little bit, you're creating a better hinge. So you'll start to feel a stretch on the outside of that left hip, right? Okay, now if you're super stiff and tight, you're gonna come down like way over here to the side over your thigh. Because what we want to do is tip with that nice straight thigh. So you're going to face towards Nate in order to bring your hands down onto the ground on the other side of your left leg. So you're going to turn that way to hinge. Okay? If you're more flexible, if you're like, no big deal, what you might do is hinge more down towards the shin. But what I'm trying to do is maintain length in my spine. So I don't want to reach and have my spine curve out. That doesn't really do me much good. Okay? So whether you're forward or whether you're out to the side, keep your spine really long and get to a 4 or a 5 out of 10 stretch. So use your hands on the ground to give you better spinal position.
What if you're feeling it like right behind your kneecap?
Play around with the position of your front leg a little bit. Bring it wider, bring it closer in until you get the alignment that feels better. Is that working?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so now once we've found that 4, maybe 5 out of 10, again, think about the idea, would I lift weight in this position? Kind of no in this one, but we want to get as close to that as we can. And now we're going to activate it. So the oscillation is actually pushing this leg down into the ground. So what it's going to look like is that I lift my chest up off the floor, but that's not my intention. My intention is actually to push the floor away from me so that I'm squeezing the muscle on the outside of my hip. And then as I relax the muscle, then my chest comes back down to the floor. So think about pushing the leg into the ground. Don't think about lift my chest, right? So we might do 4 or 5 of those. And then pause in that new end range at the bottom. And we try to be really relaxed on the last one, but still keep length in the spine. So most of you looks pretty good. For some of you, there just needs to be some precursor mobility before we do this stretch, right? So again, for some of us, we just maybe don't stretch at all, and we just need simpler things to get started. This is already one that's got a little bit more going on in it, right? There we go. So we come back out of that one, and we would switch over to the other side. So find your 90-degree angles. I recommend keeping the front foot active. That protects the ankle, right? So then we're not hanging off tendons on the outside of the ankle. Use your hands to sit up really tall. Maybe even pull your butt underneath you so you get a better hinge. Keep your spine as long as possible. And whether you go over your thigh or over your knee or over your shin, find your 4 out of 10 stretch sensation. Once you've got that, you're doing 4 or 5 PNFs, pushing your knee into the ground. So it'll look like your chest is lifting, but what you're actually trying to do is push the floor away. After 4 or 5, hold that new end range at the bottom. Keep reaching your chest forward. So your hip goes back, your chest comes forward. That keeps your spine really nice and long, right? And then relax from there. All right. So what would we have foam rolled to pair up with that stretch? Glutes, right? So quads matches to split kneeling hip flexor, inner thighs matches to adductor rock back, glutes matches to this little 90-90 stretch.